this computer. Well, hi, everyone. I am Elizabeth Bryety, and I'm going to be, leading the discussion today. Hold on, still. And we'll pull up our lovely slide deck here and get started. So our meetings, for those of you who are new, last exactly 1 hour. I will not have time to look at the chat while I'm talking. So maybe Jennifer, could you monitor the chat, and if there's anything I need to know or Ryle needs to know, if you could just let us know. And so welcome everyone to the people that have been here many times before, as well as to those of you who are new. Here's what we're hoping to cover today. We have several, I think, fairly important topics to go over. The first will be a continuation of our November discussion, where we talked quite a bit about recent negative publicity that was happening with anthropology in the press, and how to deal with that. And in this case, we have been lucky enough to develop a partnership with the AAA to help us, and we'll get into that in a minute. Second big section is going to be on another possible initiative that we might do, and that's basically a time for you to open up your ideas and share them with everyone. So it's a discussion format. Then after that, we should have a brief overview of the 2 class projects that are happening this spring term. Next, we'll talk about what's going on at the SFAA meetings. Next, we'll talk about the current situation with our tools that we've been making for both students or job seekers on the one hand, and instructors on the other. And then finally, some updates. So we're going to jump right into the negative publicity in this new partnership we've created with the AAA. And just as a way to review, I'm not going to go through the newspaper articles. For those of you who are interested, we can provide the links afterwards. Just indicate that in the chat that you want to see those. But the point that I want to make is that the publicity issue is not that simple. There have been a lot of statements in the press about how anthropology is not a very useful discipline or career relevant. And of course, we violently disagree with that. But there are issues that are behind those statements. The first is that most organizational leaders don't understand what anthropologists do or how they might operate in a work setting. The second point is that many anthropology faculty don't believe it's their job to teach students how to prepare for careers outside of academia. And part of that is due to many of them feeling uncomfortable teaching about something that they are just unfamiliar with. And the third point is that administrators and faculty at universities and colleges are being increasingly pressured to demonstrate value, whatever that might mean. And some of the issues that they are facing involve reduced enrollments, and they don't have a way to come back with really robust, solid responses when they are challenged about anthropology and what it offers the world. So that's a very brief overview. This next slide is really my attempt to explain how I am thinking about this issue. I sort of see it as both an issue of demand and an issue of supply. So on the demand side, we have to deal with the organizations. What is it that organizations in industry, nonprofits, and government need from potential new hires? What is it? What are the kinds of skill sets that they are looking for? And how can we help fulfill their searches for new hires? So that's on the one side. And then the supply side is, how do we prepare students for those kinds of positions? We have to solve both of those problems simultaneously. If we only solve one, we're putting too much of a burden on one part of the problem, assuming that that's going to be enough. And it really isn't. We've got to tackle this in two key ways. So getting to the partnership then, we suggested to the AAA during the month of December that we might be able to work with their departmental services program members. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, these DSP members are departments, not individuals. So the department has a membership with the AAA. There are about 300 such departments. So it's a pretty good amount of departments that we potentially could have access to. And what we proposed and what was accepted was that we do two things. The first is to hold two different events that focus on what do those department representatives think are student concerns about their future careers. What do they hear from their students? What do the students talk about to them? Now, admittedly, it's not going right to the horse's mouth, but it is a way to gather some information from the instructors and department chairs about student concerns. So we're having those two events. We now have dates and times. February 14th, Valentine's Day, will be the first one, and the second one 1 month later. And so in that first one, we will talk with whoever shows up at this event, virtual event, about what they're hearing from students. And then we will go away and try to process, what did they say, what might be useful to them, helpful to them in their roles as instructors and chairs, and come back with some proposed solutions. In the March event, we will then propose some number of initiatives to them and then get their reaction, essentially try to validate what we heard them say, and then what we're thinking that we might be able to do with them, for them, in conjunction with the AAA. So that's the first supply side initiative. And the second is aligned with it, which is this same group of DSP members would receive a 3-question survey. And it was purposely, we started out with 8 questions and we got it down to 3. The focus being, let's do something short and sweet, hopefully get a pretty robust response rate. And the questions are essentially asking them to give us an indication of their colleagues and their colleagues' willingness to teach practical anthropological skills to their students. And so the first 2 questions are really on a Likert scale. And then the third question is just an open-ended question where they can respond in writing. And you might be thinking, well, why do these two very different approaches. And one of it is that we think that the DSP members will respond differently. You know, it's pretty fast to respond to a 3-question survey, as opposed to participate in 2 1-hour meetings. So that really figured into our thinking. And then we also want to get a sense of who out there is open to the kind of work that the Career Readiness Network has been doing that may not know about us yet or may not know much about us. And with the survey, we will have an ability to know who is responding, so it's not anonymous, and we will know the institution that they're from, so we can approach them directly later. And then just to give you a sense, here are the 2 flyers that Zahira Aragon made for us for these 2 events. And as is always the case, we will post the slide deck and the recording of this meeting on the website. It usually gets posted 4 to 5 days after the meeting. So you can look for that. Any questions or comments on anything that I've talked about? Perhaps something was not clearly articulated, or perhaps you just have a general comment.
Elizabeth, I did want to shout out that folks did ask if you could share some of those negative articles.
Sure.
So when you send out the deck, maybe just include those then.
Okay, will do. Okay, then let's move on to the second item on the agenda, and Ryle is going to take us through this.
Right, I am. And Elizabeth, you should cut me off when you think we've talked enough about this
Okay, sure.
thing, because I've learned I can't talk and keep time at the same time. I don't think many of us can. Anyway, the idea is now to look at the other side of this thing. If this is the supply side, then what we're talking about in this particular case is the demand side. And the point's been made that a lot of people out in the for-profit, nonprofit, and government sectors don't understand as much as they probably should about what anthropologists do and how useful they can be. So the idea is to generate some notions, some approaches to fixing that in some way. And here were some of the things that Elizabeth and some of her colleagues dreamed up. They're right here in front of you on this slide for doing that. Developing case studies that show how anthropology is used. Elizabeth went off and did a very nice little project with Western Ontario University last year, where some of those case studies were developed, and there's room to do many, many more. One of the things that all of us, I think, have been concerned about is the fact that the lessons of practice are not getting back into the academy. They're not getting used in teaching. And so one way to do this is to look at case studies from practitioners and not only use them for teaching, but turn them around and give them back to the organizations and say, look, see, this is what can happen. Another possibility is to develop internships, figure out some way of feeding students in as temporary employees, so that people get used to having an anthropologist in the office and listening to what they have to say. Another opportunity is to use some of our better influencers, thinking about people like Gillian Tett and other people like that, who are already known to people, who already have a platform, so to speak, and have some savvy about how to deal with publicity in the media, and working with them to develop a series of short messages for people. Reaching out and building coalitions with allied fields. I think we ought to talk about that. Allied fields could be of 2 kinds. They could be organizations on the outside that employ anthropologists and that are, as it were, user-friendly. The other thing that we could do is to build coalitions with cognate disciplines that already have inroads. And I'm thinking of business, engineering, and medicine at our universities, for example. Writing more op-eds for sure. Learning how to do that is important, but also getting them into print, getting them out. Figuring out how to talk to people about the concerns that are surfacing with ESG, you know, environmental, social, and governance values. You can pull stuff off the web, like this, for example, which lists some of those things. This is from the World Economic Forum, I think, but there's similar sorts of things like that out there. And talking about, so how does anthropology work in those areas? What specifically can we do to advance those sorts of values? And then finally, just developing a better set of narratives about what anthropology is, and giving that to our students, giving it to our instructors, giving it to our practitioners so that they can go out and talk to people in a more meaningful way about what anthropology can do for them. I had one other suggestion, which I will throw in here. And then I'd like to open it up for whatever anybody else wants to say. And that's this. In my former life, when I was director of international programs, I worked a lot with faculty members and especially with deans, provosts, and college presidents to help them figure out how to find and hire the best people to run their international programs. Traditionally, 50, 60 years ago, what they did was they would put the grumpy old semi-retired professor of French in charge of that, and he or she would get to do the study abroad for the little college or something. Today, this is not the way it's done at all. Places like Michigan State or the University of Minnesota, it's a multi-million-dollar enterprise. It sends thousands of students overseas, and it has to be an absolute class act. The problem with it is, it's kind of like with anthropology. There's no template for this. If you're hiring a chemistry professor, you know what you're looking for. If you're going to hire somebody to run your international programs, you're not necessarily sure what you're looking for. So we worked with college administrators a lot to show them how to find people, how to assess them, and how to hire them. And I think something like that would be very, very useful for anthropology as well. So that's my suggestion to that.
I'm going to stop the share and we can just talk. So whoever wants to throw in an idea on the demand side, that we'd love to hear them.
Well, I have one thought with regard to the case studies. You know, I've noticed over the years that when a lot of us talk about our cases and a lot of us talk about what anthropologists can do, we tend to speak a little too generally. You know, we might talk about the concept of culture, for example. And it's great, it's important, and anthropologists love to talk about that. But the truth is, if you take somebody who is not in anthropology and doesn't really care about what's under the hood, what they really want to know is, how can you help me solve my very specific problem? And a case study that is very specific to a problem, and then offering a solution that gets people to think, oh, I never would have thought about this without your help, which is also really key. Because I think, unfortunately, you know, in the social sciences and to some degree the humanities, but especially the social sciences, a lot of people think of the social sciences as revealing the intuitively obvious. And I think if we're going to sell put that in quotes, convince applied areas, whether it's industry or whatever, to hire us, we have to surprise them and delight them in what we can do that they can't get anywhere else. And it's got to be very specific to a problem.
Okay, thank you. Who else?
So my name is Ree, and this is my first time joining Acorn. Hi, I'm really excited about this.
Cool. Cool.
So I graduated with a anthropology degree from the University of Minnesota Duluth in 2007. I graduated with honors, and then I went on food stamps because I had no idea how to get a job. So I completely agree with what Robert said. I currently work in the for-profit sector. I have for about 10 years, and I have had a lot of the struggles that Robert has talked about with how do you say soft skills without sounding like you want to be a kindergarten teacher, right? Like, how do you talk about empathy and systems thinking and the ability to be an arbiter or a mediator or do stuff that is not just HR related activities, people things. The only reason that I got into the field that I'm in now is because of an internship. So I really like that idea of bringing people in and kind of exposing them to different things as they're in college and trying to figure out what they want to be when they're grown up. Because let me tell you, I did not think about that at all when I was in college. I was like, anthropology, that sounds amazing. That sounds cool. Declared as a freshman after reading a one-page piece of paper, didn't change my major once, loved it. But I had no idea what to do with it. And I was so focused on getting my degree, I didn't think about job applicability. So I think both the things that Ryle and Robert said hit on a lot of the points that I personally struggled with. So double thumbs up.
I would just add to what both of you just said. I want to emphasize Robert's point. We tend to speak in generalities when we talk about how valuable anthropology is, and that doesn't impress anybody. We did the Delphi surveys last year and asked people, we didn't ask them, how do you explain anthropology in the workplace? We asked them, what questions do you get asked? Because that's a more interesting way to look at it. What do people want to know? And I think I've mentioned this to some of you before. Some of the questions were stupid. Oh, it's bones and stones, or you study dinosaurs or something like that. And okay, fine. So we deal with that. But most of the questions that people got asked, they weren't interested in learning about anthropology. They said, how can you help us solve our problem here, right now, this problem right here? And if you had an answer for that, you got hired. And if you didn't, they would say, thanks very much, we'll get in touch. And that was the way that seemed to work. Now, that may seem a little cold and callous and very corporate to people, but I would remind us that that's the world. And that's how the world works. The world needs to get stuff done. And we're either helping with that or we're not. And so I would second Robert's point in spades and say, the way we want to develop case studies, the way we want to start coaching people in workshops, we don't have to get this into the sort of the theory and philosophy of anthropology part of the curriculum. But when it comes to career preparation, absolutely. You have to have people who are ready to answer that question.
And I think this is Gina. I'm at San Diego State. I think there's 2 points. We're looking at budget shortfalls. Administrators are looking at degrees. Who's offering more degrees? Who's graduating more students? Those are real things that departments are dealing with, having to make a case for why their department should still exist. So that's important. I think a lot of us have to work harder to make a case that anthropology is relevant. We can recruit students, we can get in place. So I'm all about internships and preparing them. But I think, going back to Rial's and to y'all's discussion of how do we solve problems, I think a lot of students have gone through these degrees and not necessarily had a workshop on how to solve problems, or what's the anthropological lens? What's the anthropological edge? That if someone is trained in anthropology, we are taught to think with complexities or think about age or class or ethnicity or language, that all things are not equal for everyone, that might be something that someone trained in anthropology might bring to the table. What is the anthropological edge? So that's something for us to continue thinking about as we continue to make an argument on the value of anthropology as a field and its applications to the world.
All right, I think Suzanne has her hand up, but I want to add after Gina. So go ahead, Suzanne.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. I've worked quite a lot on what's called program evaluation. And this is in the international development field. It's a very important thing to just check whether things are working or not, and if not, why. And I had way too much work. I mean, there was no limit to the demand for this actually. And the methods we use of going out in the field, actually talking to people, and were really extremely effective. So I just want to put in a plug for program evaluation when we're making, when we're talking to on the demand side, what we could do for you is like, I was actually surprised myself how much my anthropology training was relevant to all of this. I wasn't sure. And by the way, I was never really hired as an anthropologist. I was hired as a person with experience in organizations, and eventually it kind of snowballed. But the word anthropology, there was a lot of misunderstandings about anthropology and what it is. I had stupid conversations with engineers and so on about what anthropology, but that didn't matter. Like, I was doing program evaluation. As Rial said, that's the problem I can help you with, is to find out if this thing is actually working, and if so, yes, and if not, why. So I just want you to all think a lot about that. And when we get involved in some kind of curriculum, that has to be part of the vocabulary, because it sure is part of the vocabulary of the demand side of people I was working with.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Because I was, oh, sorry, Elizabeth, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
I was just gonna say thanks.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, if we think about the existing disciplines, to Raul's point, and other people who are doing well and working in these spaces, like, where does anthropology add to their success at doing their job? So, like, where is our value add? And also, like, not trying to create anthropology as like this is anthropological work only, whereas where does anthropology fit into existing work and make it, yeah, effective,
Yeah,
to your
we
point.
have to learn their vocabulary if we're going to do the demands. Like, we did a lot of what is called situation analysis. Well, duh, that's what we do, right? So there's a lot of vocabulary. This is something I found academic colleagues couldn't do, was translate what we can do into what you need. So there is a translation issue, and learning the vocabulary of that sector is step number one, isn't it?
Melissa?
Yeah, I agree with everything that people have said. It echoes what I find with potential and current clients. You know, with the global business anthropology meetings, for example, we always talk to ourselves, or even like Elizabeth, when we had, I mean, obviously we were at the anthropology meetings, but we were kind of an insular group of business anthropologists, organizational anthropologists. So I always wondered why we didn't have, or maybe we have, and maybe it's been put on the table, an event where we invited industry leaders to hear the case studies. I mean, have we done something like that, or are we going to do something like that?
We have talked about it, certainly at the AAA, they've talked about it, and Ed may remember, but I was part of a conversation where I really thought we were heading down that path, and then it didn't happen. So maybe that's something that we could think about. Ed, do you recall anything?
I think this is Ed, and I think that this is an ongoing tension within the association, as how much its convenings are for the community and how much they are to be used for reaching out to alliances, as Ryle was saying earlier. I think that there are a number of technological affordances nowadays that have emerged in the last few years, and it might be possible. I would look to Daniel and to AAA staff to see if there are ways of both organizing and presenting the prospect of including people from a number of different settings for a genuine exchange.
Yeah, just on that point, I'm sorry, I should raise my hand. Just a quick thing. I think we should not only invite others to our meetings, we should be going to their meetings. So
Exactly.
if you work in industry, if you work in a consulting company or a research company or whatever it is, there are meetings that you go to generate business. I think it would be great if the American Anthropological Association essentially presented at some of the key meetings in, for example, industry. It's not the only area. And we have the content. We probably have some great people that could present, and it would be, and you can even have little booths at those meetings. It costs a little bit, but it's probably great because then there's that outreach, and to the point that Melissa made, which I agree with 100%, let's get out of the echo chamber. Let's get out of talking to ourselves. Let's go to the field.
Jose?
My idea had been formulating kind of in its own way, but I think it kind of ties with what Melissa's saying, right? Is how do we have these discussions with people? I was thinking in terms of written materials. When Suzanne was speaking, she was talking about, having to learn the language and having to, I think it would serve two purposes, both pedagogical and marketing. I want little articles that I can just hand over to my students, right? So Suzanne explaining, I had to learn this type of language so that I could do that, right? It's sort of, God, it's applying linguistic anthropology to be able to solve problems, right? And how to market yourself. But I think on the other hand, also, to Melissa's point, how do we reach out to these people? It's with these brief little vignettes, perhaps, or some kind of marketing material that can be handed over that gives kind of some insight into these case studies. So I see it as, if we can get some of this stuff written out, some short form for marketing, some longer form for pedagogy, we can kill two birds with one stone. But this clearly needs to be written with people that have the experience. I'm an academic, I can't write this, right? It needs to be written by the practitioners. So we need those relationships need to be nurtured in such a way that they want to write this stuff and share it with us.
I actually think that, yes, practitioners, but I've been an academic and now I'm an academic practitioner. I think it would be nice to co-write these things because that would be an exchange in knowledge production. Just for an example, so, I mean, that's probably so that the silos were lessened.
Nice point. AJ? We got a couple of more minutes and then we're going to have to move on. AJ, go ahead. And then Racine.
Sure, I'll be quick as I can. I want to point out on the idea of getting testimonial from industry, from non-anthropologists in industry, I mean, when I say industry, I mean all sectors. I'm the director of a graduate program in Silicon Valley, and while I don't work with Silicon Valley firms, my program does. And a few years ago, I went out and did lunches with dozens of leaders, and I was at a major tech company where their head of research, I said, I know why I took this meeting with you today. I said, why did you take this meeting with me? I wanted to make sure that we had good pipelines for student internships and employment and stuff like that. And he said, at a certain point a few years ago, I realized that 80% of all of the most qualified applicants I had were coming out of San Jose State anthropology. And I must have dined out on that sentence alone for about 6 months.
Wow.
And I mean, really, my feet didn't touch the ground. And I just thought that was great. And I use that all the time. And so wouldn't it be cool if I could have even just used my phone, right? Or squeezed a few more sentences out of him and had that little testimonial, something if we had a collection of these, on the Acorn, website that, when somebody's how does anthropology add value? I can talk your ear off all day long, or I can have the best anthropology practitioner or whatever say this, but what are the employers saying? If we had, and this reminds me, some of you might remember, I'm sure Racine probably does, some years ago when Florida really thought they had a bad governor, they started this project out of USF, mine and Racine's alma mater, that was the This is Anthropology project. It later sort of withered on the vine, but it was really full of potential at one point, where it was testimonials of anthropologists all over Florida, and then it expanded. And it was what are anthropologists doing, and for whom, and anywhere? What problems and issues are they addressing? It started out strong, and I could see Acorn developing something like that, whether it's text or video testimonials. This is the value that this has added to the work that I do.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Racine?
Thanks. I think this is all great stuff. Kind of stole the thunder out of my head, except for one point I want to tack on to what's been said. Showing the value of anthropology is great, but I think the extra mile or half mile needs to be is showing what sort of data, findings and insights anthropologists can provide beyond what you get from data scientists, on the computer side, or MBA mentality analytics, because those things are useful in their own right, but what sort of extra nuance and business value or organizational, social value, whatever you can get by, not only seeing the big picture, but from a dashboard, being in the room where it happened, as it were.
Okay. Yep, that's it. That's great. Okay, we're gonna go back to the slide deck and we'll have hopefully a few minutes at the end. But Ryle, you're gonna take over now for the SFAA?
Oh, right. Did you not want to do the spring class projects?
Oh, sure. Shoot, I missed that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I skipped ahead. Yeah, so we have we have two instructors who are going to work with us on spring class projects, and I believe they're both here today. So Ellen, do you want to talk about North Dakota State?
Sure. So hi, Ellen Rubenstein. I am the only cultural and medical anthropologist in the state, as far as I know. So it's always nice to connect with other anthropologists, especially because, like many publicly funded universities, we're always on the chopping block, essentially. So I have to make a correction on the slide. I just gained 2 more students as of today. So I now have 18 students in my 300, so mid-level, right, medical anthropology class. I have been doing some applied medical anthro work, particularly with pharmacists in our university's School of Pharmacy. We don't have a medical school, but we do have the state's only School of Pharmacy. So pretty much most of the practicing pharmacists in the state of North Dakota have come out of North Dakota State University. So one of my colleagues from there, who is an ambulatory care pharmacist at one of our major health systems, basically has been talking with a couple of friends. They've noticed a lot of burnout, however they're defining that term, among their colleagues, and they are interested in learning more. So because I've done some work with this pharmacist already, she has a sense of what qualitative research can bring to the table. And as far as she knows, and as far as their student has discovered in a literature review, the only work that's been done on pharmacists and burnout has been quantitative. So they're not really sure exactly what they're looking for at this point. And I think part of our job as anthropologists and anthropology students will be to help them sort of define the problem and define what they would like to do about the problem. But at this point, we are looking to, there are 3 ambulatory care pharmacists. They're going to reach out to their colleagues and do some recruiting for us. Apparently, there are only 10 or so ambulatory care pharmacists in the state of North Dakota, but the health system that they're part of is also in Minnesota and I think South Dakota as well. So we'll get a slightly larger sample from the non-North Dakota pharmacists. We'll be doing the interviews. The students will be writing in tandem with, I think, Acorn and the ambulatory care pharmacists, coming up with the interview guides. The students will conduct the interviews. I'll take them through some kind of rudimentary data analysis, and then they'll make presentations to my pharmacy colleagues at the end of the semester.
Super. Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm excited to work with you. Thank you.
And Susan?
Hi, everyone. So once again, we're going to be working with the group, the network, on a project. In this case, we're going to be doing an evaluation. So I teach a course every couple of years called Evaluation in Anthropological Practice. It is primarily program evaluation, Suzanne. It's an incredibly important course, teaching students how to bring anthropology to evaluation problems. So we're going to, so Elizabeth and Ryle said we have something that we need to know more about, which is basically how are things going in the network? Are we bringing value to its membership? And also, how can we make some changes or course corrections so that we can get more members to actually post their career profiles and or internships. But this is a work in progress. The first step will be to interview the quote stakeholders to get a better sense of what kinds of evaluative or assessment information is needed for the network. And then we will be developing a survey. So it's going to be a mixed method approach of qualitative methodology, interviewing folks in the network, and then coming up with a survey for the membership. So I don't know exactly what that survey is going to look like at this point because we haven't interviewed anyone yet. But you will stay tuned. By probably March or April, we will have something for the membership. And I'd also like to highlight the fact that 2 of the students from that course are currently attending this meeting, and
Oh, super.
Donnell and Zoe. So
Wonderful. Yeah, and so as Susan mentioned, this is UNT's second time around, and Susan specifically with her students doing a project for us. So we're extremely appreciative. And this one here will help us get to know our members better and what their thoughts are on the future. We're about to embark on a strategic planning activity to bring more focus into what we're doing. We've been doing so many different things. We feel now a lot of that stuff can, pretty much operate on its own, but we want to start focusing more. Ryle, okay, SFAA?
Yeah, sure. Real quick, because I'm conscious of the time. Let's go to the next slide and we'll pull up the list. Okay, so the one that's not on here, and I apologize, is Mark Moritz's session, which I think got left off on my list because it's under a higher education TIG, and I apologize for that. But in addition to the ones that you see here, Mark is doing one on Thursday entitled Assessing Career-Ready Curricula for Anthropologists, and that includes participation by several of the people who are right here with us on this Zoom call. But what I wanted to point out was here are the main sessions. There may be a few others here and there. If there are, we should probably add them. But these are the main ones, and we also have a booth. So one of the things that I would like to ask people to think about is if you are going to attend the SFAA meeting in Santa Fe, would you like to take a turn at manning the booth? Manning's probably not the right word we want to use here, but staffing the booth. Yes, there we go. Elizabeth and I are going to be there for most of the time, but not all the time. So if you are interested in helping out with that, could you send one of us? Thank you, Mark. I see your comment already. Very good. Let us know if you're interested in helping out. And if we don't get enough people, we'll be walking around the meeting in Santa Fe, collaring people, strong-arming them to come in and help staff the booth. It's easy. You explain what we're up to. That's all it is. And we'll have materials there. We'll have some swag. We'll have a nice banner, and it'll be a fun time. So if you would help us out with that, that'll be great. The other thing I'd just like to point out before we move on to the next set of slides is that almost all of these sessions that you see here are either workshops where we're trying to build skills and capacity in people, or they are discussions. I don't think there's any of these that's actually one of these sort of I talk, you listen, reading out a paper to a room people. It's apparently not the style that most of us are comfortable with. We're interested in talking about this. So please attend as many of these as you can, talk about them with your colleagues, and if you have some spare time, come and help us run the booth. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, tools and blog posts. I did a count because I was just curious about the resources that we have produced mostly over the last 2 years. Well, there it is. Tools and exercises, a total of 35 so far. And those tools and exercises focus on essentially 4 areas: skill building, job search and interviewing, anthropological methods, and problem solving. And the blog posts, even slightly higher, and those blog posts focus on either careers or career prep. We also have done some where we highlight a particular tool, but again, those tools are often career prep related. And then I was communicating with Matt Arts, our webmaster, last night, and I was asking him, you know, if he had any data on downloads. Well, he does have data, and this is only up through October 8th, so 3/4 of 2023. But you can see the data right there. It's not bad. And for those of you who are interested in knowing what are the top tools and exercises on the student side, there are 4 of them that are blue ribbon winners. And on the instructor side, 3 of them. So that gives you, I think, some sense of what people are finding particularly valuable. So now the question is, we've had a number of people suggest other tools. And you yourselves may know of some that we do not have, that you have the expertise to develop or help develop. So we're looking for volunteers to draft new tools. For the student job seeker group, there are some basic ones there. Navigating graduate school is an interesting one. How do you do that? Client management is another fascinating one. Kathleen Crane is a master at it. Maybe she would take a crack at it. Look at her looking at me. On the instructor side, how is it that you build a solid relationship with area employers for the purpose of an internship or for the purpose of creating a pipeline for students to get jobs? How do you do that? Instructors want to know. And if you have experience doing that already, we want to hear from you. Or what about promoting anthropology on your campus? I was talking about this in a meeting this morning with Mark Moritz and some other colleagues, and I made the point that anthropologists are terrible at talking about themselves. They tend to be fairly humble and self-effacing and quiet, and we got to stop that. We got to start talking about how fabulous anthropology is and how fabulous we are. And so, for those of you who might have promoted anthropology on your campus, what did you do? Why did you do it? And how do we learn how to do it? So those are just some possible tools. If you have others in mind, hey, we're ready to listen. So please put your name in the chat to help out with this. I can call somebody and say, hey, could you do this for us? But it's much better if it comes directly from you. And then Priscilla Lynn is always looking for new blog posts. We have some in the pipeline. We usually have, I don't know, maybe as many as 2 or 3 in the pipeline at a time. But we put out 2 a month. So those 2 go by pretty quickly. Anybody can write a blog post. You can be a student and write a blog post about your experience at an internship or your reflections on what you're learning and how you believe it is or is not preparing you for the work you need to do or you will end up doing in the future. Instructors can write blog posts about what they're teaching, what students find interesting. And practitioners can write blog posts about the kind of work that they do and the skills required and advice they might have for others. So anybody can write a blog post. It's 750 words. It will not kill you, I promise. So think about it. We just need volunteers. We can't do it all ourselves. Some quick updates. Update number 1. If you are an instructor consider going to our Speakers Bureau and look to see if there's anybody there listed who would be an appropriate speaker who could come in via Zoom into your classroom. Let's say you're teaching a class on environmental anthropology. Yeah, we have people that have signed up to be speakers. Or if you have some organizational event at your firm or at your nonprofit, maybe it's a brown bag lunch and you need a speaker. We've got speakers. So please take a look at who has self-nominated to put themselves on this speakers list. They're all practitioners. They're all full-time employed by some organization. Take a look at what they might have to offer your group. For those of you who may not know, we've got 2 recent articles that focus on the career ready curriculum. This is an instructor tool. One came out in Practicing Anthropology this summer, and a second came out in the Annals of Anthropological Practice just this past December. And then yesterday, we had another article accepted, and this one is led by Matt Arts, and it had to do with student focus groups. It is fascinating, and it's coming out. It's just published yesterday in the Anthropology News. So if you want to know what students are thinking about with respect to career prep, take a look at that article. Kathleen, please tell us about practice standards.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kathleen Crane. I am the co-chair of the National Association for the Practice of Anthropology's Professional Development Committee and a member of the network. The Global Anthropology Project, which is a loose configuration of anthropology organizations trying to promote anthropology profession across the globe, is hosting NAPA's new standards presentation. Everyone needs to gain skills, but skills don't take you the full distance. You need to know how to use those skills in an ethical, practical way that responds to the problem and the clients. And so NAPA has standards, and they have just been released within the last 2 months, and we're doing a series of presentations to tell people about them, but then to get feedback on them. And we're going to be posting them on NAPA's website, but there will be this presentation a week from Saturday for the Global Anthropology Project. And I've just put the link in the chat. So if you want to attend, you can register and come and listen to the standards and then provide us with feedback. We want these to be as final as a living document can be and have the value brought by a wide audience of professional practicing and applied anthropologists. So join us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. I have seen an earlier presentation. I can't recall if it was November or December, but it's definitely worth attending if you're available. Undergraduate students, for any of you out there or for instructors of undergraduate students, two notices. The first is that the mentorship program award is opened up again for juniors. So if you're teaching juniors or if you are a junior, this award could be for you. Application deadline is March 1st. You can apply on the AAA website. And the cool thing about this is that you get 2 mentors for a period of about 8 months. You get a practitioner and you get someone who is academically based. And you are talking with them over that period of time about your thoughts, your dreams, where you think you might want to end up, whether you want to go to graduate school, whatever. It's a great opportunity. Second notice is ABT Associates or APT Associates, which is located in Maryland, has openings I saw for 105 interns. So if anybody you know is interested in internships, this place might be a really good one to look at. And then for graduate students, this just in this afternoon, the New Florida Journal of Anthropology, which is based out of the University of Florida and is an open access journal, is looking for short pieces from graduate students, or you could be early career anthropologists, about practice. But it's much broader than that, but they're really interested more in what students are thinking of getting into and or what are they currently doing. And it turns out one of the members of the network is now working as part of this journal. And then, of course, as we mentioned earlier, we would love to have graduate students or any student write a blog post for the network. And you could submit to Priscilla Lynn, and her email is right there. And then the last slide is shout outs. These are recent articles, relatively recent articles. The first one by Tara and Melissa. Melissa's here today. The misguided, sorry, she isn't here today. Tara and Melissa, misguided attack on liberal arts education. This was partly a response to all the negative publicity that Anthropology was getting in November and December. And you can see that date of publication was December 28th. And it's a nice article. That was in the Sun Sentinel, which of course is in Florida, one of our favorite states. Second one listed there is Work Design Magazine, and Melissa Fisher, who is here today, wrote it with her colleague Hannah. And it was originally written in September, but it turns out it was among the top 10 articles that this magazine put out in 2023. So kudos. And then the third one was is by Autumn McDonald, Bolstering Market Research with Anthropology, and that came out in Forbes. So super work. And thank you so much for attending. Next meeting is March 21st.
See you all in Santa Fe.
Yeah, we'll have a meeting before Santa Fe.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's a week before Santa Fe.
You're right.
Yeah. So thank you all for coming today, and we look forward to communicating with you in the very near future. And don't forget to save the chat.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can I get the PowerPoints because I came lately?
Yes, Desta, we will send them. We will not send them out, but we will make them available on our website. They usually get posted 4 to 5 days. As soon as Matt has a moment to post them and the recording. So you can listen to the recording and you can see the slides.
Okay, that is fine. It's very good. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I just stayed on for a minute to say hi.
Hi, good to see you.
I'll call you. I just read in the chat. It was a very good meeting. I had 2 students here doing applied anthropology class, 2 undergrads with me. So, and I saw Sarah was here too. She's in Peru. So.
Oh, Sarah's in Peru. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's on a teaching Fulbright in Peru this semester. So
oh my
I don't know
goodness.
if it was from there.
Oh, that's great.
I see you're still recording, but anyway.
Yeah, I'm still recording. I guess I should stop the recording.
You know, due to the time, I was very late because in Ethiopia now it says midnight, I mean.
Midnight for you? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, bye everybody.
Bye.
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 So Elizabeth.